Seattle had that kind of rain that never stopped falling. It whispered instead of poured, like a reminder that nothing ever truly ends, only fades. Daniel Moore watched the droplets slide down the glass wall of his office, tracing invisible lines that blurred the skyline. From this height, the city looked perfect. Orderly streets, polished towers, lives moving in rhythm. From this height, perfection was always a lie. At 41, Daniel was everything people said success should look like. Partner in a thriving architectural firm. Winner of design awards. A man whose work appeared in glossy magazines, whose smile at social events looked genuine enough to convince even himself. He lived in a minimalist home on Queen Anne Hill with his wife, Clara, who worked in art curation. They were the kind of couple people envied, elegant, accomplished, enviably quiet, and yet lately quiet had turned into something else, something colder. Dinner had become a ritual of avoidance. Clara's phone would light up on the counter, and she'd turn it face down before excusing herself. Her laughter had grown softer, rarer. She spoke less to Daniel, more to invisible worlds inside her glowing screen. He noticed. He noticed everything. It began months ago, a subtle drift. Missed calls, forgotten anniversaries, excuses wrapped in silk. Work ran late. You should eat without me. Don't wait up. Each phrase left a small hollow inside Daniel. He'd fill it with sketches, deadlines, long drives through the city at midnight, pretending the emptiness was just fatigue. But silence, he learned, was not absence. It was accumulation. That night, it happened without intention. Clara had left her phone on the kitchen counter while taking a shower. The screen lit up, just once, with a message that seemed harmless at first. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Same place. The contact name was disguised. Daniel froze. His reflection stared back at him from the glass surface of the stove. Eyes calm, expression unreadable. For a moment, he almost placed the phone back down, almost chose ignorance. But something within him, an architect's precision perhaps, refused to leave the blueprint unfinished. He opened the thread. What he saw wasn't graphic, wasn't obvious. It was worse. It was emotional. Words layered with private intimacy, memories of a weekend work trip, photographs of wine glasses in sunlight. A kind of tenderness Clara had stopped giving him years ago. The message history ended weeks earlier, as if she had begun deleting. She wasn't careless. She was practiced. When Clara returned, hair damp, skin glowing from steam, Daniel stood by the window pretending to check an email. She smiled briefly. You're still working? He nodded steady. Just finishing a few details. That night they lay beside each other, bodies inches apart but galaxies away. He watched the ceiling instead of sleeping, listening to her breathing even out. Betrayal, he realized, didn't explode. It leaked, slowly, silently, like a faucet no one noticed until the floor drowned. Days passed. Daniel said nothing. He studied her like a project, her expressions, her absences, the new perfume she wore when leaving for late gallery meetings. He replayed every moment of their marriage, looking for cracks he hadn't seen. They were everywhere now. Hairline fractures beneath the paint. One morning he found himself driving aimlessly after a client meeting. The radio played a song Clara used to hum. He turned it off. He parked by the waterfront and watched ferries cross Elliott Bay. The rain blurred everything beyond the windshield. People, cars, meaning. He whispered to himself, maybe this is my fault. The thought didn't comfort him. It only deepened the ache. That evening, Clara texted she'd be late again. Daniel replied simply, take your time. But instead of waiting at home, he drove to the downtown art gallery where she claimed to be. He parked across the street, engine running, headlights off. Through the rain-slick window, he saw her, Clara, in a black coat, laughing softly as she leaned toward a man. Tall, confident, the kind of charm that filled a room. When the man brushed a strand of her hair aside, Daniel's chest tightened, not with rage but with understanding. The man was familiar. He had seen him before. Ethan Reynolds, a former client, a partner in a recent real estate project. He didn't step out, didn't shout, didn't confront. Instead, Daniel memorized the scene like an architectural rendering, angles, light, motion. everything precise. When Clara left with Ethan, Daniel remained, watching the gallery lights fade one by one until only his reflection stared back from the windshield. He drove home in silence. The house smelled of her perfume when he walked in. He poured a glass of scotch and sat in the dark living room. Around him, everything was still. The artwork she'd chosen, the minimalist furniture he'd designed, the life they'd built. It all looked perfect. Daniel raised his glass slightly, as if to toast the empty room. To perfection, he whispered, and the lies that keep it standing. Outside, the rain kept falling. Quiet, endless, deliberate. The following days felt like walking through a play he no longer believed in. Daniel moved through the office, through meetings, through the rhythm of design sketches and client calls, while a quiet hum of betrayal underlined every thought. He worked side by side with people who saw him as composed, confident, methodical. No one noticed the hollow forming behind his calm exterior. He began searching, slowly, precisely. He didn't have to hire anyone. The architectural world in Seattle was a small circle. Names circulated, collaborations overlapped. Ethan Reynolds wasn't a stranger. He was a name Daniel already knew too well. Ethan had once been the ambitious developer behind the Mercer project, a modern housing complex Daniel's firm had designed 2 years earlier. Back then, Ethan was magnetic, all charisma and laughter, the kind of man who filled silence effortlessly. Daniel remembered the way Clara's eyes had lit up when she first met him at the launch party. "He's different," she had said afterward, smiling too brightly. Daniel, distracted by deadlines, had nodded without thinking. He realized now how many things he had nodded through in their marriage. One afternoon, Daniel pulled up the old project files, looking for something, anything, to remind him who Ethan was beyond the polished surface. His name appeared everywhere in the emails, in meeting transcripts, in the photos from ribbon cuttings and press events. There they were, Ethan and Clara, standing too close for a professional photo. It was right there, unnoticed, frozen in the background of his own life. The next evening, Daniel found Ethan's company profile online. The website showcased Ethan's smiling face beneath a tagline, "Building Futures Through Trust." Daniel almost laughed. The irony was surgical. He scrolled through photos of corporate galas, charity events, fundraisers. Clara was present in more than one, always at the edge of the frame, always almost hidden. He took notes, not of vengeance, not yet, but of understanding. He wanted to know the man Clara had chosen over him. At home, Clara behaved as if nothing had changed. She cooked, asked about his projects, and kissed him goodnight with the ease of a seasoned actress. Daniel played his part flawlessly. They spoke of deadlines and family, never of feelings. Sometimes he would look at her and think how effortlessly she lied, how gently betrayal could wear the mask of routine. The following week, Daniel attended a networking event hosted by the Chamber of Commerce. He hadn't planned to see Ethan there, but fate rarely cared for plans. The moment Ethan walked in, laughter surrounding him like perfume, Daniel felt the air tighten. Ethan was, as Daniel remembered, tall, athletic, immaculately dressed. His handshake was confident, his voice warm. When their eyes met across the room, there was no recognition of guilt in Ethan's, only charm. "Daniel Moore," Ethan greeted, clasping his shoulder as though they were old friends. "It's been a while. How's business?" "Steady," Daniel replied, his tone neutral. "And yours?" "Thriving, as always." "I was hoping we might collaborate again soon." Daniel smiled thinly. "You do seem to have a talent for partnerships." Ethan laughed, oblivious. "That's what they tell me." For the rest of the evening, Daniel observed him, how people gravitated toward Ethan, how easily he made them feel seen. It was the same magnetism that had drawn Clara in. Daniel realized that Ethan wasn't a predator. He was an artist of desire, painting attention where it was most needed. And Clara, with a restless spirit, had simply stepped into his frame. When the event ended, Ethan clapped Daniel's back. "Let's grab coffee sometime. I've missed your perspective." Daniel nodded, the perfect imitation of civility. "I'll call your office." But when he left the venue, his hands were trembling. Not from rage. Rage was simple. What he felt was sharper, quieter. the kind of emotion that etched itself beneath the ribs. At home, Clara was asleep. Daniel stood at the foot of their bed, studying her face under the soft glow of the bedside lamp. She looked peaceful, as if untouched by the storm she had caused. He wondered if she ever felt the same emptiness he carried now. He whispered her name once, not to wake her, but to test if it still felt real on his tongue. It didn't. In the days that followed, Daniel's life resumed its pattern. He woke early, went to the office, replied to clients, and kept his mask intact. But now he began drawing something else in his sketchbook. Not buildings, not blueprints, but outlines of human faces fractured by lines. The lines intersected, splitting, merging again. It was chaos disguised as symmetry. He realized that Ethan Reynolds was not just his wife's lover. He was a reflection, a younger, freer version of the man Daniel once had been before success hardened him. They were both builders in different ways. Ethan built illusions, Daniel built walls. Clara had simply chosen the illusion that still breathed. That night, Daniel closed his sketchbook and whispered to himself, "We're all architects of something, even destruction." The city outside shimmered through the rain, its lights fractured by the window pane. Inside, Daniel sat alone in his quiet apartment, feeling the first faint draft of a plan forming. Not revenge yet, but precision, the kind that builds itself slowly, silently, until the foundation is ready to collapse. The morning light in Seattle was gray and thin, the kind that made everything look like an unfinished sketch. Daniel sat at his kitchen counter, coffee cooling beside him. When the envelope arrived, heavy paper, embossed seal, the kind that carried the scent of wealth and expectation. He almost ignored it. The mail had become background noise lately, full of things that didn't matter. But the name on the sender's label made him pause. The Northwest Art Foundation Annual Charity Gala. He turned the envelope over in his hands, feeling the weight of it, before sliding a finger under the flap. Inside was a cream-colored invitation printed in elegant serif letters. His eyes moved down the list of hosts. Then they stopped. Hosted by Ethan and Sophia Reynolds. For a long moment, he simply stared. Then a laugh, quiet, disbelieving, escaped him. The sound echoed strangely in the empty kitchen. It felt like fate had a cruel sense of humor. He read the date again. 3 weeks away. A black tie affair at the Seattle Art Museum, the very world Clara adored. Art, culture, people who mistook aesthetics for morality. He could already picture her there, smiling, radiant, pretending that her life was untangled. Daniel placed the invitation flat on the counter and traced the letters with his fingertip. The texture of the paper was smooth, deliberate. Everything about it whispered control, elegance, deception. Much like the people behind it. He took a slow breath. The rational part of him told him to decline, to stay away. But reason had long ceased to be the architect of his actions. The moment he saw Ethan's name, a strange calm settled over him, a clarity sharper than anger. He folded the invitation neatly and set it aside. By the time Clara came home that evening, his decision had already hardened. She entered with her usual air of practiced cheerfulness. "You're home early," she said, slipping off her heels. "Client meeting got canceled," he replied, not looking up from his tablet. "There's something for you on the counter." She picked up the invitation, and for a brief second, her expression changed. An involuntary flicker of recognition. Then came the smile, polished and quick. "Oh, the Foundation Gala. Ethan and Sophia are hosting this year. I heard it's going to be stunning." Daniel looked up, meeting her gaze. "You know them well?" Her hand hesitated just slightly on the envelope. "Ethan's involved with several art programs. We've crossed paths professionally." "Of course," he said. His tone was smooth, unremarkable. "Would you like to go?" She blinked, surprised. "Us? You never go to these things." "Maybe it's time I did," Daniel answered. "We should support the arts, shouldn't we?" Clara smiled, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "All right, if you really want to." He nodded, as though the idea had only just occurred to him. But when she turned away, his gaze lingered on the back of her neck, the delicate line where truth ended and pretense began. That night, after she fell asleep, Daniel sat at his desk. The invitation lay beside his sketches. He opened a fresh page in his notebook and began to write. Not drawings this time, but details, names, dates, connections. A blueprint not of buildings, but of people. He imagined the gala like a stage, light, glass, music, the perfect setting for revelation, not loud, not crude, elegant, inevitable. Revenge, he thought, should be an art form. Over the next few days, he moved through life with renewed precision. At work, his designs grew sharper, cleaner. Colleagues called it inspiration. Daniel knew it was control. Every decision now carried the quiet pulse of purpose. He researched Ethan and Sophia discreetly, photos, interviews, financial records. Sophia appeared in society columns, beautiful, poised, the picture of grace beside her husband. But in her eyes, even through photographs, Daniel saw something else. Distance. A shadow of someone who smiled for the camera, but not for herself. By the second week, Daniel had decided exactly how he would attend. He would not go alone. He would enter that room not as a victim, but as a mirror held to their deception. The thought both frightened and steadied him. On the final evening before the gala, Daniel stood by the window, holding the invitation again. Outside, the city shimmered under drizzle and streetlight. He read the embossed names one last time, then whispered quietly to the night, "See you soon, Ethan." He slipped the invitation back into its envelope, smoothed the crease, and set it on the desk beside his glass of scotch. The rain tapped gently against the window, rhythmic and relentless, like the ticking of a clock counting down to something inevitable. In the reflection of the glass, Daniel saw his own face. Not the tired man who discovered betrayal, but someone new, someone patient, someone dangerous. The blueprint was complete. All that remained was to build. The night of the gala unfolded like a performance rehearsed for months. The city glowed beneath a soft drizzle, its skyline reflected on wet pavement. Daniel stepped out of the car, his tuxedo tailored perfectly, every detail measured. The knot of his tie, the polish on his shoes, the calm set of his face. No one looking at him would have guessed that this night was not about celebration, but confrontation. Inside, the Seattle Art Museum shimmered with light and movement. Crystal chandeliers scattered reflections across marble floors. Waiters moved like clockwork, champagne flutes glinting as they passed. The air smelled faintly of lilies and expensive perfume, a scent of curated perfection. Daniel blended easily among the crowd, offering practiced smiles, polite nods. His eyes, however, were searching. And then, across the room, he saw her, Sophia Reynolds. She was standing beside a sculpture in white marble, her gown the color of dusk, soft and fluid. Her beauty wasn't the kind that demanded attention. It invited curiosity. There was grace in the way she carried herself, but also a stillness, as though she had learned to breathe quietly to survive in rooms full of noise. Ethan was beside her, laughing with donors, his arm loosely around her waist. Daniel felt a familiar tightening in his chest, but it wasn't jealousy anymore. It was recognition. He watched as Sophia's smile faded the moment Ethan turned away, a small fracture in a perfect mask. Their eyes met across the crowd. For a heartbeat, neither looked away. Then Sophia inclined her head slightly, an unspoken acknowledgement, before she moved toward the terrace. Daniel followed. Outside, the night air was cooler, threaded with the distant hum of the city. Sophia stood by the balustrade, her back straight, her hands clasped around a glass of champagne. She didn't seem startled when Daniel approached. "I was beginning to wonder if you'd come," she said, her voice calm, low, with a hint of something like amusement. He raised an eyebrow. "You expected me?" "Let's just say I was curious." She turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "Ethan mentioned you once or twice, the architect with the quiet wife." Daniel smiled faintly. "And you, the perfect hostess." Her eyes held his, steady and searching. "Perfect is just another word for controlled, Mr. Turner." The way she said it, slow, deliberate, made him pause. She took a sip of her drink, gaze drifting toward the rain-slick streets below. "You know," she continued softly, "people like Ethan and Clara, they need the illusion of something grand. Affairs, art, charity, it's all decoration. They build it around themselves like armor. Daniel's breath caught slightly at the mention of Clara's name, but he said nothing. Sophia turned back to him. "You're not here for the art, are you?" He hesitated, then met her gaze. "And you?" Her smile was faint, almost sad. "I used to be. I thought beauty could save things that were already dying. I was wrong." For a moment, silence stretched between them. Inside, the orchestra swelled, muffled through glass doors. Out here, only the rain spoke. Daniel studied her face, not with desire, but with understanding. There was something profoundly familiar in her composure, the quiet strength of someone who had learned to live beside betrayal. "How long have you known?" he asked finally. Sophia's lips curved, but her eyes didn't soften. "Long enough to stop asking why." He looked away, exhaling. "You surprise me." "That's because you expected me to hate her," she said simply. "Or him. But I don't. I just stopped caring in the way that hurts." Daniel felt a strange relief in her words, as if she had spoken a truth he'd been circling for weeks but couldn't articulate. "Then why stay?" he asked quietly. Sophia's gaze drifted toward the ballroom. "Because sometimes leaving too soon means they win. Staying, observing, that's my way of taking back control." Her words echoed in him. Control, the one thing both of them had lost and were now reclaiming in their own ways. He found himself saying, almost without thought, "Maybe we're both architects then, just of different ruins." Sophia looked at him, and for the first time that night, she smiled. A real one, small but alive. "Maybe," she murmured. "Or maybe we're both married to the same lie." The sentence landed between them like a confession. Daniel's pulse stilled. She finished her champagne and set the glass down gently. "Enjoy the rest of your evening, Mr. Turner. I have a feeling it's only just beginning." Then she walked back inside, her silhouette framed by the golden light of the gala. Daniel stood there, rain beginning to mist his hair, her words echoing in the quiet. Married to the same lie. He glanced through the glass doors and saw Ethan laughing, Clara beside him, radiant in her deceit. And in that moment, Daniel understood. The game he thought he was starting had already begun long before tonight. And Sophia, she was not just a witness, she was a player. The rain fell harder, drumming softly against the stone, as Daniel's reflection blurred into the night. Rain had become a rhythm in Daniel's life since the gala. Soft, persistent, and oddly cleansing. Each morning it blurred the skyline of Seattle, washing the glass towers until the city looked like a watercolor painting. Somewhere in that haze, Daniel found himself returning again and again to the same corner cafe on Pine Street. It was quiet there, the kind of place where words could settle slowly, without echo. Sophia arrived on a Wednesday. She wore no makeup this time, her hair loosely tied back. Dressed simply in a gray coat. Yet somehow she seemed even more composed, more deliberate than she had at the party. "You chose this place," she said as she sat down. "I didn't expect you to be the type for local cafes." "I didn't expect you to come," he replied, a small smile breaking through his reserve. She stirred her coffee, eyes lowered. "Curiosity," she said. "And perhaps I wanted to see if you were as calm as you pretend to be." Daniel looked at her. Really looked. Her calmness wasn't detachment. It was survival. "I'm calm because I have to be," he said. "Anger only feeds them." Sophia nodded slowly. "Exactly." That word, so simple, so shared, created a fragile bridge between them. For a moment, the sound of rain against the window was the only thing filling the silence. They spoke then, not of revenge, not yet, but of understanding. She told him about Ethan's restlessness, his endless search for validation through other people's admiration. Daniel spoke of Clara's quiet deceit, the way she'd learned to smile even while lying, as if her mask had grown into her skin. "Do you ever wonder," Sophia asked, "if we're the reason they became this way?" Daniel shook his head. "No, they were always chasing something that wasn't us. We just happened to be the ones holding the door open when they walked out." Sophia's eyes softened, almost with pity. "That's the cruel part, isn't it? We're the collateral damage to someone else's emptiness." Outside, the rain thickened. People hurried past the window, umbrellas colliding, colors smearing into motion. Inside, time seemed slower, suspended. Sophia leaned back, her gaze fixed on the window. "Ethan thinks I don't know about his affair," she said quietly. "He still tries to hide the messages, the late nights, the rehearsed excuses." Daniel's pulse quickened, though his expression didn't change. "And Clara?" "She's the same," Sophia said softly. "Only better at pretending." Their eyes met again. The weight of shared betrayal hung between them, heavy, electric. It wasn't attraction, not yet. It was the relief of finally being seen. "I don't want to destroy them," Daniel said after a pause, "but I can't let them walk away untouched." Sophia studied him carefully. "You're not the vengeful type." "No," he admitted, "but I am tired of being quiet." Sophia exhaled, a faint tremor in her breath. "Then maybe we don't destroy them," she said. "Maybe we just let the truth do it for us." Daniel looked at her, unsure if she was suggesting a plan or a confession. "The truth?" She smiled faintly. "Truth is patient. It doesn't need a scream to be heard." The rain slowed, the sound softening against the glass. Something shifted between them, subtle, like the turn of a tide. Over the following weeks, their meetings became routine. Always the same cafe, always mid-afternoon when the city felt half asleep. They talked about everything and nothing. Art, faith, the lies people tell to survive. Sometimes they laughed quietly, as if remembering what it felt like to be human again. Daniel began to notice things about her. The way she avoided eye contact when she spoke of her husband. The way her fingers tightened around her cup when silence felt too long. She was strong, but there were cracks beneath the surface. One afternoon, she showed him a photograph from her phone. Ethan and Clara together at a hotel fundraiser, smiling as though the world had never been kinder. "I don't know what hurts more," she said, "seeing it or knowing I've become numb to it." Daniel stared at the image for a long time before replying. "It hurts because you still care," he said quietly. "And that's the cruelest wound of all." Sophia looked up then, her eyes glistening, not with tears but with clarity. "Maybe we both care too much," she whispered. He nodded. "Maybe that's what makes us dangerous." Their eyes locked again, and for a heartbeat the air between them thickened. Not with desire, but with recognition. It was in that silence, amid the scent of coffee and rain, that something unspoken solidified. They weren't lovers, not yet. They were allies, bound by quiet pain, by truth unvoiced, by a shared need to reclaim something stolen. The beginning of a silent alliance. The alliance had started as a quiet understanding. Two wounded souls sharing the same shadow. But over time, the silence between Daniel and Sophia became something heavier, something charged. It wasn't spoken of, not even acknowledged, but it lived in the pauses, in the space between words, in the way their eyes lingered a little too long. Seattle's summer arrived pale and hesitant, sunlight filtering through clouds like forgiveness that came too late. Daniel found himself sketching again, lines that made no sense, shapes without purpose. He realized he wasn't drawing buildings anymore. He was drawing faces, her face. He met Sophia that afternoon at their usual cafe. The rain had stopped, replaced by a golden light that spilled across the wooden tables. She smiled when she saw him, but there was something guarded in her expression. "You've been quiet," she said, stirring her tea. "I've been thinking," Daniel replied. "That sounds dangerous." He smiled faintly. "Maybe it is." For a while they talked about trivial things. Work, news, the noise of the world. But underneath every word was something else. Something they both felt but refused to name. When Sophia reached for her cup, her fingers brushed his. It was accidental, brief, but it changed the air instantly. Neither of them moved for a second. Then she pulled her hand back, too quickly. "Sorry," she murmured. Daniel shook his head. "Don't be." The silence stretched. She looked away toward the street, where people passed without noticing the storm brewing between two strangers inside. Finally, Sophia said softly, "This wasn't supposed to get complicated." Daniel's voice was low. It already was. Her eyes lifted to his, sharp and pained. "You know what I mean." He did, but knowing didn't make it easier. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. Clara was beside him, scrolling through her phone, smiling at messages she thought he couldn't see. The soft glow of the screen painted her face in cold light. He turned away, closed his eyes, but all he saw was Sophia standing by the cafe window, her reflection merging with the rain. A few days later, they crossed paths again, this time not by design. It was a charity event downtown, another polished evening of laughter and champagne. Daniel had been invited through his firm. Sophia came with Ethan. The moment they saw each other across the room, something in both of them shifted. It wasn't longing exactly, more like recognition, the kind of recognition that made the air tense, that others could feel without understanding why. Clara noticed. She followed Daniel's gaze and found Sophia in the crowd, her expression calm, elegant. Clara's smile faltered for just a second before she masked it again. Later, when Daniel approached the bar for another drink, Clara slipped beside him. "You know," she said lightly, "Ethan's wife looks different up close. I didn't expect her to be so poised." Daniel didn't answer. Clara tilted her head, studying him. "You've met her before, haven't you?" He turned to her, his expression unreadable. "Everyone meets everyone in this city, Clara." Her smile was thin. "True, but not everyone looks at each other the way you just did." The words hung there, sharp as glass. That night back home, Clara was distant, not angry, just watchful. Daniel could feel her gaze even when she said nothing. The house felt smaller, the silence heavier. The next afternoon, Sophia called. Her voice was calm but tight. "Ethan asked me if I've seen you lately." Daniel's chest tightened. "And I told him the truth," she said. "That I ran into you once at a cafe. That's all." He hesitated. "He believed you?" "I think so. But Daniel—" She paused. "We need to be careful. They're starting to see what we've been pretending not to feel." The line went quiet for a moment. Then Daniel said softly, "Are you pretending, Sophia?" Her breath caught. He could hear it. "Aren't you?" He didn't answer. When they met again a week later, there was no talk of Ethan or Clara. They just sat, watching the rain return. The silence between them had changed. No longer fragile, but dangerous. Sophia leaned forward slightly, her voice barely above a whisper. "If this keeps going, it'll destroy everything." Daniel looked at her, his voice steady. "Maybe that's what needs to happen." Her eyes shimmered, not with tears, but with fear of something real. "You don't mean that." "I don't know what I mean anymore." Outside, thunder rolled softly in the distance. For the first time since this began, Sophia reached across the table, not by accident, not by hesitation, and took his hand. "Then let's not pretend it's still about them," she said quietly. And in that moment, every wall they had built began to crack. By late autumn, the rain no longer cleansed the city. It only blurred it. Seattle seemed to dissolve behind the fog, and Daniel felt the same erosion inside himself. The boundary between truth and lies, guilt and desire, had become paper thin. He hadn't planned to see Sophia again so soon, but one evening after days of silence, she called. Her voice was unsteady, the calm she'd always carried cracking at the edges. "Ethan's been going through my phone," she said. He found the messages. Daniel's heart stilled. "What messages?" "The ones about the cafe, our meetings. I deleted them, but he knows something." He exhaled slowly. "Meet me," he said. "Same place." When she arrived, the world outside was gray, the cafe nearly empty. She looked pale, her hands trembling slightly as she removed her gloves. "I feel like I'm being watched," she whispered. "There's this sense, like someone's 2 steps ahead of us." Daniel leaned forward. "You think it's Ethan?" "Maybe, or Clara." The sound of her name tightened the air. "She's been distant," Daniel admitted. "Too quiet. I know that silence. It's the kind before a storm." Sophia managed a weak smile. "Seems we're all weathering storms now." They sat in silence for a moment, both knowing what wasn't being said. There had always been a fragile line between them, the unspoken rule that they wouldn't cross. But fear has a way of softening principles, and loneliness has a way of justifying sins. When Sophia's hand brushed his across the table, neither pulled away. The touch lingered, hesitant, human. "Daniel," she whispered, voice trembling. "What are we doing?" He didn't answer. Instead, he reached for her hand fully, his thumb tracing the line of her wrist, a pulse beating fast, mirroring his own. And then, without a word, she leaned across the table, and he met her halfway. The kiss was not soft. It was desperate, brief, and filled with everything they'd been holding back. When it broke, both sat frozen, breathless, terrified, awake. "This changes nothing," Sophia said finally, but her voice was shaking. "It changes everything," Daniel murmured. They didn't see the man sitting by the window, phone in hand, snapping a single photograph before leaving. 2 nights later, Clara confronted him. She was standing by the kitchen counter, her expression unreadable. "You've been spending a lot of time at that cafe," she said. "Isn't that where Sophia Reynolds goes too?" Daniel froze mid-step. "What are you implying?" "I'm not implying," Clara said, her tone calm, measured. "I'm asking." He forced a laugh. "You're being paranoid." "Maybe," she said, "but paranoia is just intuition that's seen too much." She walked away, leaving her wineglass half full. Daniel stood in the silence, his pulse thudding painfully in his ears. Later that night, he checked his phone. There it was, an unknown number, a single image. Him and Sophia at the cafe. Her hand in his, lips inches apart. The caption read only, "You're not as invisible as you think." Daniel felt the blood drain from his face. He called Sophia immediately. "Someone's playing us," he said. Her breath came fast on the other end. "I got the same message." "Who?" "I don't know." She hesitated. "But I think Ethan's seen it. He's been different, quiet, watchful. He asked me this morning if I believed in loyalty." Daniel's throat went dry. "We need to talk. Somewhere safe." But there was no such place left. The next day, Clara sat in her car outside Daniel's office. Her fingers gripped the steering wheel as she stared at the photo on her phone, the same one Daniel had received. She should have felt rage, but what she felt instead was clarity. All the late nights, the distance, the lies, they fit now perfectly. She scrolled further, more pictures. Daniel at the cafe, Sophia laughing. Different angles, different days. Someone had been watching them for weeks. Clara didn't know who had sent them, but she knew what she had to do. She texted Ethan, "We need to talk." That night, Daniel sat alone in his studio, the city lights bleeding through the window. He looked at the sketches scattered across his desk. Lines that once meant buildings now looked like fractures breaking apart. He picked up his phone, typed a message, then deleted it. There was nothing left to say. He looked out at the rain, realizing that the lie he thought he was uncovering had already begun to uncover him. The unraveling had started, and there was no stopping it now. The night Clara met Ethan, the city was dressed in cold light. The bar was nearly empty. A low hum of jazz, the smell of whiskey, and 2 people who had run out of illusions. Ethan arrived late, his expression calm but unreadable. He slid into the seat across from her, eyes dark and calculating. "So," Clara began, her voice steady, "we both know." Ethan didn't flinch. "Daniel and Sophia," he said simply. She nodded, her fingers tracing the rim of her glass. "I wanted to be sure before coming here. Now I am." He leaned forward. "What do you want to do?" Clara met his gaze. "End it. Not with anger, not with chaos, but with clarity." A slow, bitter smile curved his lips. "You sound like someone who's been planning this for a while." "I've been surviving this for a while," she corrected softly. For the next hour, they spoke like 2 detectives piecing together a crime. They compared notes, photographs, behaviors. Ethan confessed that Sophia had become distant, afraid, and that he'd installed a tracker on her car weeks ago. Clara didn't even blink. "I don't want revenge," she said. "I want truth. Let them see what they've done. Not to us, but to themselves." Ethan nodded. "Then we let them expose themselves." Meanwhile, Daniel worked late at his studio. The exhibition was only days away, his first major show in years. The walls were lined with his pieces, architectural abstractions that once represented balance and restraint. Now they looked fractured, as if every canvas carried the tremor of his conscience. Sophia had stopped calling. The silence between them was suffocating, filled with what ifs and what now. When she finally appeared at the door one evening, drenched in rain, Daniel didn't know whether to let her in or to run. "Ethan knows," she said, shivering. "He doesn't say it, but I can feel it. He's everywhere, watching, listening." Daniel poured her a drink, his hands trembling. "We'll figure it out. After the exhibition, I'll tell Clara everything. No more hiding." Sophia gave a hollow laugh. "You think honesty will fix this?" "No," he said, "but maybe it'll stop the bleeding." They stood there, surrounded by paintings that seemed to mirror their undoing. Sharp edges, muted tones, a world falling apart quietly. The night of the exhibition arrived. The gallery was bathed in soft white light. People murmured, glasses clinked, and Daniel moved through the crowd with a practiced smile. Clara was there, elegant as ever, in a black dress that drew eyes and whispered power. She congratulated him with calm civility, the kind that chills more than anger ever could. Sophia arrived later, accompanied by Ethan. They looked like a perfect couple, poised, composed. Only their eyes betrayed them. For a moment, everything seemed suspended. Music played, people admired the art, and beneath it all, tension coiled like a fuse waiting to burn. Then it happened. The projector in the corner flickered. The slideshow, meant to display Daniel's creative process, suddenly shifted. The image that appeared was not a sketch or blueprint. It was the photograph. Daniel and Sophia at the cafe, hands intertwined, lips almost touching. Gasps rippled through the room. Conversation stopped. Every head turned toward them. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. Sophia went pale. Ethan's expression didn't change, and only the faint curve of satisfaction flickered at the corner of his mouth. Clara stood still, glass in hand, her eyes fixed on Daniel. Someone whispered, "Is that real?" Daniel opened his mouth, but no sound came. The walls of the gallery seemed to close in, every light harsh, every eye a judgment. Clara finally stepped forward. "I think the art speaks for itself," she said quietly, her voice carrying over the stunned silence. The words landed like a verdict. Daniel felt the ground tilt beneath him. His own work, once a reflection of control, now mocked him with its chaos. He turned toward Clara, but she didn't look away. There was no rage in her eyes, only a strange, exhausted mercy. Sophia tried to speak, but Ethan's hand on her arm stopped her. "Not here," he murmured. "Not anymore." In that moment, the illusion shattered completely. After the crowd dispersed, Daniel stood alone in the dim gallery. The photograph still glowed faintly on the wall, a wound refusing to fade. Clara approached him, her heels echoing softly against the floor. "You always said the truth was what gave your art meaning," she said. "Now you finally have it." He turned to her, voice barely a whisper. "Was it you?" She paused, then smiled sadly. "Does it matter?" When she left, the silence that followed was heavier than any accusation. Daniel looked around at the paintings, the empty wine glasses, the remnants of applause. Everything he'd built, everything he'd lied for, had collapsed under a single flash of light. The final exposure had come, and it was merciless. The morning Daniel left Seattle, the city was wrapped in mist. The skyline, once a monument of ambition, looked like a fading memory behind the rain-streaked window of his car. He had lived here for 17 years, built his firm, his home, his marriage, and now all that remained was a set of packed boxes and silence. The gallery incident had changed everything. Overnight, the press feasted on scandal. "Prominent architect exposes wife's affair at art gala," the headlines read. Clara vanished from public view. Ethan resigned from his company and sold his shares to cover legal debts. Sophia, humiliated but strangely liberated, closed her studio and moved in with her sister in Portland. And Daniel? He stayed for weeks, cleaning up the ruins. The phone calls came. Reporters, friends, even rivals, all wanting a quote. He never answered. The house felt different without Clara's perfume, without her piano humming in the evenings. He wandered from room to room, tracing the outlines of their shared life. The framed photographs, the cracks on the wall where they had once argued about paint colors, the faint imprint of her favorite chair near the window. There was no anger left. Only fatigue. One afternoon he sat at his drafting table and stared at a half-finished blueprint. The lines were perfect, symmetrical, almost sterile. It reminded him of his life. So controlled, so meticulously designed, yet hollow inside. He reached for his pen and drew a single diagonal stroke across the page, cutting through the perfection. Then he put the pen down and never touched it again. That night he began to write. The letter was short, no accusations, no explanations. Just one truth he had learned the hard way. Forgiveness isn't about them, it's about freeing yourself. He folded the note and placed it on the dining table, under the small bowl where Clara used to drop her keys. Then he turned off the lights and went upstairs. For the first time in months, he slept soundly. When morning came, the sky was pale gray. Daniel packed his last bag, closed the front door gently, and left the keys inside the mailbox. The air smelled of wet earth and pine. His car waited by the curb, an old black sedan that had seen too many late nights at the office, too many arguments turned to silence. As he drove through the streets, the city unfolded in fragments. The coffee shop where he met Clara for the first time, the bridge they crossed after their wedding, the park where they once dreamed about children they never had. Every place was a ghost, and yet, strangely, he felt lighter. Traffic thinned as he reached the outskirts. The radio played something soft, a song about letting go. Daniel lowered the window. The cold wind rushed in, sharp and cleansing. He didn't know where he was going. Maybe somewhere quiet, maybe nowhere at all. But he knew what he was leaving behind. The noise, the pride, the endless need to be right. As the miles passed, his thoughts drifted to Clara. He could still see her face the night of the gala, frozen in disbelief, pain, and shame. He wondered if she hated him, or if she finally understood what he had felt all those years. The slow erosion of love, the loneliness disguised as routine. He didn't wish her harm anymore. That part of him had died the moment the photograph appeared on the gallery wall. Revenge had been loud, but peace was quiet. At a rest stop overlooking the sound, he parked and stepped out. The air was cold enough to bite. Below, the water shimmered under the cloudy sky, endless and gray. He stood there for a long time, hands in his pockets, breathing in the salt and distance. From his coat, he pulled out a small photograph, one taken years ago, of him and Clara at the same spot. She was laughing then, her hair caught by the wind. For a moment, he let himself remember what it felt like to love without fear. Then he let the picture slip from his fingers. It fluttered once, twice, and disappeared into the water. When he returned to the car, he didn't look back. The road ahead stretched into fog, uncertain and unmarked. Daniel turned on the headlights and kept driving, the city shrinking behind him until it became nothing more than a blur of light and memory. He had thought revenge would make him feel powerful. Instead, it had stripped him bare. Yet in that emptiness, there was clarity, a quiet acceptance that life continues, even after everything breaks. And somewhere between the fading skyline and the rising dawn, Daniel Moore, the man who once built everything on precision and control, finally surrendered to peace.